Welcome back to my kitchen here in Las Vegas. Today we have a great dish for you. We're gonna make a home citrus cured and smoked salmon, and we're gonna serve that with a cucumber raita, which is an Indian dish usually made with mint. We're gonna change it up and do it with dill, which is a classic pairing for salmon. That's all coming up right now on Platinum Grilling with me, Chef Shaun O'Neale. Welcome back to Platinum Grilling. I am your host, Chef Shaun O'Neale. Today we are working with salmon, and in full disclosure, I do not like salmon except for this salmon. It's smoky, it's sweet. The cure really brings in the citrus flavors to this. So we're working with a great 3-pound slab of salmon here. I advise you to really get to know your butcher or your fishmonger because they're really gonna hook you up if you develop a relationship with them. So the first thing we need to do today is, it's a couple day process making this dish. It's actually 48 hours to cure the salmon. And we're gonna cook it on a cedar plank, right? Just to impart a little bit more flavor during the cooking process, as well with the smoke coming in from the Pit Boss Lockhart is what we'll be using for this salmon. Well, since we're using the cedar plank, I'm gonna trim this up just a little bit. Don't worry, it's not going to waste. My wife loves sushi, so I'm gonna use that belly portion to make her a little sushi roll. She'll be happy with that when she gets home. So the first thing, like I said, we're gonna trim up the belly on the salmon just to make sure that it fits nice and snugly and evenly on our cedar plank, because we're gonna be wrapping this up and we're gonna be letting it cure in the fridge for 48 hours. So I'm gonna take off just a tad bit of the belly here, and then I will set this aside to make that sushi roll for my wife later on today or tomorrow. So we'll just set this piece aside, and then we'll double check to make sure we've got a nice fit here on our salmon. Yeah, that would be perfect. So now that that is done, salmon's trimmed up, what we want to do is make our cure for the salmon. So we're using the Blackened Saskatchewan seasoning from Pit Boss. It is one of my favorite seasonings. I use it for everything. On the bottle they recommend for chicken and fish, but I love it on steak. Really adds that kind of blackened, peppery flavor that it's advertised to do. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take about 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, kind of break that up a little bit, make sure we don't have any clumps. I like to do this with my hands. Especially once the citrus is in there. It just helps you break up the citrus clumps a little bit when you, after you grate the citrus down. So this is our Blackened Saskatchewan seasoning. We're gonna use about 2 to 3 tablespoons of that. 2.5 probably, somewhere in that range. This is the zest of 1 lemon and the zest of 1 orange as well. So we're not gonna use the juice for this, because what does juice do to fish? I mean, we see it with ceviche all the time. The lemon juice or the citrus juice actually cooks the fish. So since this is gonna be curing for a few days, we don't wanna use any juice. We don't wanna cook this. What we're doing is changing the texture. We're firming up the texture, extracting some of the liquid. And some of that liquid, that water within the fish, the protein itself is what can make a fish taste fishy, right? Because most fish is usually, for the most part, flash frozen before it's shipped out, usually done on the boats. This is wild caught salmon, so this was actually fresh. There's not gonna be quite as much water in there, but we're still going to cure it for the 48-hour process and then smoke it up. So let's mix up our cure here. Make sure everything is broken down. You don't want any clumps of the brown sugar. You don't want any clumps of the orange. That's why I like to get in here with my hand, because you can really feel it, right? If you're using a fork, you know, you can see a little bit, but you can really feel where the clumps are and where that citrus is, because the citrus is still kind of wet, right? So it's gonna form some clumps around the brown sugar. All right, almost there. Okay, so our cure is done, and you know, you could add other citruses if you want. I've done grapefruit before, lime's always good. I think this is a basic starting point for this dish. So we're just gonna do the lemon and orange zest for this. We'll get our sheet pan here. Set our salmon on there, and then you wanna make sure this thing is coated pretty well. You really want enough cure to really soak into the salmon, so you're gonna put it on pretty liberally, patting it in. I don't like rubbing it in, because it just kind of, as you see, if I rub, it just kind of falls off to the side, right? So we're gonna pat this in, You may not need to use all of the cure, but make sure you get the sides because you really want that to kind of leach its way into the fish from the ends as well. All right, so make sure we get all of this. All right, so now that our salmon is pretty well coated, and I don't see any major spots that are showing, everything's got its cure on it. Now we need to wrap this up really tightly. So we'll move our cucumbers, move our seasoning. So we're gonna grab some plastic wrap. And I know you guys probably don't have the commercial size plastic wrap at home. That's all right. So what you're gonna do is kind of lay out 2 long pieces side by side because you're gonna want this wrapped pretty tightly, okay? So let me move this out of the way for just a second so I can pull out some of my plastic wrap. Set our cedar plank smooth side up. You want the fish to be on the smooth side. This can be a little rough. They don't really process this side. So smooth side up on this fish. And then we'll move our curing salmon over here. Let me brush my hands off. All right, so this thing needs to be pretty tight, right? So I like to wrap my saran wrap down a little bit and then pull it in real tight and tuck it, okay? All right, so and then we're just gonna keep on rolling this bad boy up as tightly as we can to make sure that cure really sucks into the fish here. All right, so I want a little bit more plastic wrap. There we go, now we're getting nice and wrapped tight there. Okay. Pull this away, seal it up. Wrap our ends under there, and that is exactly what you're looking for. Nice, compact, tightly. It's gonna cure evenly all the way across because there's a little bit of pressure on it. So now all we have to do is put this in the fridge for 48 hours. Don't cheat on it because you really want that cure to get all the way through the fish, okay? So 48 hours, then we're gonna fire up our Lockhart and we're gonna smoke this bad boy, make our cucumber raita, and have some dinner. Our salmon has been curing for about 48 hours, so 2 full days. And what we're doing is we're making the meat a little bit more firm. We're changing the texture of that, and of course we're letting the meat absorb all that flavor from the brown sugar, the orange zest, the lemon zest. So now we just gotta open this guy up. Just run our knife right along the side here. Make sure you have a sharp knife. Sharp knives are always important. All right, so once we've got this open, we'll remove the plastic wrap and then we're gonna rinse this off. We wanna get rid of all of the excess. So it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of the cure left on there because we're gonna re-season it with the Saskatchewan seasoning. So let's go ahead and rinse this off. All right, so I'm just gonna check my Smoke IT app. I've got the Platinum Series Lockhart grill fired up to 300 degrees, so we're almost there. We've heated up the bottom part of the grill because that's where your heat source is. So there's about 100-degree difference from the grill to the upper smoking cabinet. We're gonna be smoking the salmon in the upper smoking cabinet, okay? So there's about 100-degree difference. When it gets higher in heat, the difference actually gets lower, right? So if you're at 450, you might have like a 375 heat in your upper smoking cabinet. So right now we're at 240, we're just about there. We set the grill to 300. That should give us about a 200-degree temperature in the upper smoking cabinet. We're gonna insert a internal temperature probe into our salmon. We're gonna cook it to 120 degrees. So I like to cook it to where there's still just a little bit of that kind of raw salmon color, so a little bit on the medium rare side. So we're gonna cook it to 120 degrees, rest it, make our cucumber rallata, make our glaze for the salmon, and then it's time to eat. So let's head on out to the Lockhart. Well, we are back poolside on a beautiful day here in Las Vegas, and it's time to get this salmon cooked up. So we're gonna go ahead and hit it with a little bit more of our Blackened Saskatchewan seasoning. Not too much, just a little bit to bring the salt level, the salinity up a little bit, because we did rinse it off. So we rinsed off a good bit of that salt. Some of the sugar remained because it's sticky, some of the citrus remained because it's sticky. But let's go ahead and season this up. The Blackened Saskatchewan, I love this on steak too. It says fish on the side, fish and chicken, but I love it on steak. It's delicious on steak. So we've got that seasoned up. Let's get it on the Lockhart. We're gonna throw it in the upper smoking cabinet. We're gonna go ahead and insert an internal temperature probe. We're gonna cook it to about 120 degrees. Then we're gonna pull it off, let it rest, and eat. But in that time, we're gonna make our cucumber Raita, and we're gonna make a little bit of a glaze to coat the salmon with while we're cooking it. So let's get it on the grill. Okay, now that our salmon is cooking, we're gonna make a very quick glaze, very easy. I have a leftover orange from an orange I zested for the cucumber Raita, and we've got 1 stick of butter in here. So let's just cut this orange, and we're just gonna squeeze the orange right into the butter. We're gonna throw it in the grill section of the Lockhart to let it melt. We really just wanna melt the butter, that's it, and let the flavors kind of combine. We're gonna glaze this about every 15 minutes. The salmon's gonna take a little over an hour, so you're probably looking at about an hour and a half roughly for the salmon. So we've got a stick of butter, 1 orange, just the juice. Then we'll hit it with some salt, probably about a teaspoon of salt, and some pepper. Not much pepper. I don't like pepper on fish really a whole lot, so just a little bit, just to kind of bring out those flavors and give us a little note of spice. And then we're just gonna throw this guy on here. So, as you can see, I've got the heat shield open, and I've got the vents in the back open, so as much smoke as possible can get from the grill up into the Lockhart. So we'll just let that butter melt. Once it's melted, we'll start basting our fish a little bit, about every 15 minutes. So now, we can move on to make our cucumber Raita. And this is a very simple dish, guys. It is just like, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ingredients, salt and pepper. I don't usually count as an ingredient. So first things first, we've got about a cup of just plain Greek yogurt, okay? Always mix your dressing in a separate dish than wherever your vegetables, and whether it be a salad or these cucumbers. I've salted these cucumbers about an hour ago just to get some of the moisture out. So we'll add 1 lemon, juice and zest. So here I used 2 zest from 2 oranges, and then just the juice from 1, and then that remaining orange was what I used for the glaze. All right, so we've got our orange juice, our lemon juice, our orange zest, lemon zest in there. Now, what makes this a little bit different than a normal Raita, which is an Indian dish, which usually uses mint. We're gonna use dill. Dill is a classic pairing with salmon. It's just gonna highlight and bring the flavors of this fish, this salmon out. You're gonna have the smokiness, you're gonna have a little bit of herbaceousness from the dill, the acidity from the lemon, the orange, and then that beautiful crisp from these cucumbers. So we're gonna use about 2 tablespoons of dill. Let's just get this all nicely mixed up. We'll season it with a little bit of salt. Once again, a little bit of pepper, not too much. You don't want the pepper to overpower this. Then we'll give this a good stir, make sure everything is fully incorporated and you have a nice dressing formed. All right, that looks pretty good. and then we're just gonna pour this right over top of our cucumbers. All right, let's make sure we get everything out of the bowl here. All right. Now let's give this a good stir, make sure everything's incorporated. It's gonna look like a lot of yogurt, but that's kind of what a Raita is. It's a very thick yogurt cucumber kind of dressing or salad. So we'll get this nicely mixed up. We'll cover it in saran wrap, throw it in the fridge, let this sit for at least an hour. You should have plenty of time because your salmon's gonna take about an hour, hour and a half. So once it's nicely mixed up, cover it with plastic wrap, throw it in the fridge. In about an hour, it will be ready to serve. Should be right on time with your salmon. All right, our orange butter glaze is nicely melted. So before I start applying the glaze, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put some tin foil down below the salmon just to keep the upper smoking cabinet a little bit cleaner. You know, makes it a little bit easier on cleanup, that is all. Okay, we've got our drip foil, if you will, in there. So now you're gonna wanna grab a hot glove or a oven mitt or something to grab the butter glaze that we've been making. So, grab our glaze out, give it a little stir with our brush. We'll do our first glaze. All right, so you can just keep your orange butter glaze off to the side. If it starts to kind of tighten up a little bit, if that butter starts to kind of congeal a little bit, then just throw it on the grill for a few more seconds, let it melt back down. I like to start basting this between 15 and 30 minutes and then do it every about 15 minutes until it's done. So usually start at about 30 minutes. That way the smoke has a time to attach and to really get that flavor into the salmon. And then 30 minutes, every 15 minutes after that, you're gonna go ahead and glaze it. We're not smoking this for a long time, so it's not a big deal if we let out a little bit of heat. And it's at a lower temperature, so it's not a cold smoke, but I'll call it a medium smoke, if you will. So we're gonna glaze this every 15 minutes from here on out. We're gonna cook it to 120 degrees internal temperature. We've got our cucumber raita made. We've got our glaze waiting for whenever we need it. And it's almost lunchtime. So our salmon is now at an internal temperature of 120 degrees. That's what we're looking for. We've been cooking it for about an hour and 20 minutes. Really get that good smoke on there. So if you wanted to cold smoke this salmon, you definitely could. The cure is pretty similar to a lox. What you would do is put a tray of ice in the bottom shelf of the upper smoking cabinet and set the smoker to just smoke temperature. So that gives you around 160, right? So that will keep the temperature in the upper cabinet 100 or below. Smoke it for about 30 minutes. You don't want to see any color change or anything like that, and you'll have this most beautiful lox for bagel and lox. It's really delicious, really great appetizer. But for now, our medium smoked salmon is done. So let's pull this guy out. All right, so the juice is just dripping out of the salmon. It looks absolutely beautiful. We're gonna let this rest for about 10 minutes. You don't need to rest it for as long as you would a huge piece of meat. And then we're gonna dive into it and serve it up with our cucumber raita. Our 10-minute rest period is up. This salmon looks beautiful. It's got a little bit of caramelization on the top from the sugars in not only the cure, but also the sugars in the orange juice. So let's get into this guy. I'm gonna transfer this to my cutting board here. Let's get this guy going. We'll plate up some of our cucumbers here. Get a nice, good sized scoop and just kind of lay it right there on the plate. Right off to the side of where the salmon will be going. It's a nice little mound. Oh, that's so good. Okay, so I like to use a carving or slicing knife for this. And let's go with this guy right here. Slice straight down through it. And then it should just lift right away from the skin. Go in here. Okay, well the skin's gonna stay attached on that one. But that's all right, you can just eat around the skin. So, as you can see, it is beautifully cooked. We're just about at a medium in there. You can still see a little bit of the pink. The juiciness on this guy is just insane. And you can see the juice just dripping out of the salmon, which is hard to do for salmon. And to cook really good salmon, you have to get it to where it still has some moisture inside of it. So that's why I like to stay on the medium side whenever I'm cooking salmon. So there's only one thing left to do on this. I cannot wait to dig into this. I don't really like salmon except for this salmon. So let's give it a shot. Oh, I can feel the caramelization and the smoke texture on the outside of the salmon. Oh man. So good. I really hope you guys give this recipe a try, even if you don't like salmon. Like I said, I don't like salmon either, but this salmon is in a league of its own. That wraps us up for another episode of Platinum Grilling. I am your host, Chef Shaun O'Neale, and I can't wait to see you next time.